For the past 15 years, Putin has been lobbying China to build the Power of Siberia 2 pipeline. And Xi chooses this very moment to announce to the world, you know what? The US just told me I shouldn't buy more energy from Russia. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to build a pipeline to buy 3 times as much. The US-China trade war is over. The U.S. has essentially said, okay, following the imposition of the rare earth thing, following the Geneva deal, they've backed down. Look at what's happened in the past few weeks. The past few weeks have been absolutely momentous. A month ago, you have the U.S. saying anybody who buys energy from Russia, we're going to punish. We're going to put in more tariffs. It's going to be terrible for them. So the U.S. sends out this message. 10 days later, you have Xi, Putin, and Modi who meet in Shanghai, and they're literally French kissing on stage, the 3 of them. They're like acting like they're the best buddies that have ever existed. Now, just that, by the way, is super important, because let's discuss for a second what's the big macro trend, the big mega trend of the future that will change the world. When I'm in the US, all people want to talk about is AI. Sure, it's exciting, etc. When I'm in Europe, all people want to talk about is how welfare states are about to collapse because fiscal spending is out of control, etc. And so you got to buy gold and you got to buy Bitcoin, and we're coming to the end of the welfare states, and that's perhaps a big macro trend. Sitting in Asia, if you take a step back, you think, okay, today we have Russia, the biggest producer of cheapest commodities in the world. You have China, the biggest provider of capital goods, the biggest provider of capital now to other emerging markets because they have the cheapest cost of capital in the world, and the biggest producer of consumer goods. And then you have India, which is the biggest provider of cheap labor. And now those 3 leaders are saying, we're going to put these 3 things together, mix it in a pot, and see what comes out as a stew. Cheapest commodities, cheapest capital goods, cheapest cost of capital, cheapest consumer goods, cheapest cost of labor. It's going to be a boom of epic proportion that comes out of this, a boom of absolutely epic proportion. Now, you take your 30 biggest market caps in the world. 24 out of the 30 are American companies. 2 out of the 30 are Chinese companies, Tencent and Alibaba. One of them is Korean, Samsung. One of them is Saudi Aramco. One of them is Japanese, Toyota. But essentially, so here are your 30. Now, how many of these 30s are going to participate in this boom? If the big macro trend of the next 10 years is the economic integration of China, India, and Russia, the answer is Alibaba is definitely a way to play it. Tencent is perhaps a way to play it. But in your top 30 market caps, there aren't a ton. So I think that the reason these stocks are ripping is that picture in Shanghai. And then I'll go one step further, really showing you that the US-China tensions are over. So the US, again, threatens everybody with sanctions if they deal with Russia. For the past 15 years, Putin has been lobbying China to build the Power of Siberia 2 pipeline. And Xi chooses this very moment to announce to the world, you know what? The US just told me I shouldn't buy more energy from Russia. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to build a pipeline to buy 3 times as much. It's almost like he said, suck on that, excuse my French. But it's like, talk about defying a direct US order. Now you could say, again, it's hubris. You could say China's cruising for a bruising. Or it's just they feel pretty confident that things with the US are on an even keel, that the ability of the US to punish China is now limited. And so now all the gas that used to go to Europe is now going to go to China for a fraction of the price, priced in renminbi. And so now you know that for the next 30 years, China, a country that already produces twice as much electricity as the US, will now have the cheapest cost of energy in the world, which is a huge shift, and will pay for energy in its own currency. For the past 15 years, one of the big drivers of US growth was that the US had the cheapest cost of energy in the world, thanks to the shale revolution. This has just shifted. China is now the one that's going to have the cheapest cost of energy. So if you're a big believer in AI, if you think, forget this China, Russia, India economic integration, who cares, whatever, these guys are hicks, I don't care. If you think AI is where it's at, then the question becomes, do you think the constraint in AI is going to be A, access to computing power? Or do you think the constraint in AI is going to be access to cheap energy? Now, if you think constraint in AI is access to computing power, then you buy NVIDIA and you buy the US. If you think constraint in AI is going to be access to cheap energy, then what's happened in the past 3 weeks is that essentially China's already won that race. And I tend to believe that actually it is going to be constrained to cheap energy, and that getting access to cheap energy requires 10 years of investments, 15 years of investments, and China is now already ahead in that race because again they produce twice as much electricity as the U.S. and electricity in China is already much cheaper than the U.S. But they essentially just got a call option to get even cheaper. So you say you won on TikTok, which is, a detail of history and in the whole scheme of things really doesn't matter all that much. But you do a deal on TikTok and the deal that's on the table is ByteDance doesn't give the algorithm that exists today. They create another algorithm. So it's like, here's essentially a shitty algorithm that you can put in this vehicle that will be owned by Oracle and by Andreessen, and that ByteDance keeps 20% of. And so you declare victory on TikTok, which is the thing that obviously is the interface that most Americans relate to. So it's the thing that Americans care about. You declare victory on TikTok and you move on. Just it'll be like the victory in Iran. They came into Iran saying we're going to do regime change, we're going to do this, etc. Drop a few bombs, declare victory, go home. And on the ground, nothing has changed. But it's, here we go. You declare victory and you move on, which is, by the way, much, much better than going through a 20-year war, whether economic or real war, etc. This is much better. You declare victory, you go on and you get on with your lives. The point I'm making is not that China's getting the upper hand in this US-China trade war, etc. The point I'm making is that it's over. It's and that's one of the many reasons Chinese stocks are ripping. The war is over. All you need now is the ticker tape parade down Fifth Avenue or Madison Avenue. You're going to get it, and it's going to be called the TikTok deal. That will be your ticker tape parade, and then you move on. I think first, it's actually different offerings. And this is where it's actually quite funny, is that the US, which is, an open society, very based on freedom, based on everything. The offers today out of the US, whether you look at your OpenAI or all the main offers are essentially closed-end systems. When China's systems are open-ended system, which is funny because it's like the opposite of what you would expect given the different societal backgrounds, but it reflects the resources of both. The U.S., their companies are so well funded, so rich, so much cash, they can't afford to be open, to be closed-ended, and China couldn't because it didn't have access to the high chips. It had to open its system like DeepSeek's and let thousands of people offer solutions, etc. So the reality is, if you're a small company, you're probably going to go with whatever solution is cheaper, and China will most likely be offering the cheaper solutions. One of my go-to sayings is that when China enters a room, profits walk out. So China has entered the AI room. So if you think there's going to be tons of profits in AI, I think you're delusional. My 30 years of living in China have taught me that if you're competing with China, you've taken a wrong turn. Like, you need to take a deep look in the mirror and think about the choices you've made in your life. Because if you're competing with China, things are going to be very tough for you. So when it comes to AI, let's not kid ourselves. China is in the room. There will be no profits in that room. That's how it is. Well, going back to what I said, if you think the big macro trend is that integration of Russia, China, India, how many U.S. brands really participate in this? And yes, look, the reason Tesla, the reason Apple are no longer doing well in China, I don't think it's as much nationalist fervor or anti-American sentiment. That might play a little bit into it. It's just that products aren't as good. Like to be perfectly honest, like a BYD car is now superior to a Tesla car, and it's not even close. It's like by a long shot, and they're much cheaper. You take the BYD Seagull, which is essentially like a Honda Civic type car, sort of hatchback. You get that 500-kilometer radius, and you get full self-drive with it, and that costs about $8,300 all in. That's the BYD Seagull. Like, how does Tesla compete with that, right? A Tesla will be 4 times that price. And same with the iPhone. You look at the Huawei phones today, better cameras, better battery life, better everything. So, how do the Western companies compete? With a lot of difficulty. Because again, the big story of the past 7 years, which I'll talk about till I'm blue in the face, but we used to identify Chinese products as being cheap, and they were. It was cheap products being made cheaply. This is, I think, the mindset we have to shift ourselves. And I encourage everybody to go to China today to see what's on offer: the trains, the cars, the phones, the fintech solutions. We've been leapfrogged. And I think deep down, we have this sort of superiority complex in the West where we're like, well, of course our products are better. But just like Japanese cars became better than American cars back in the late 70s, early 80s, this is happening, but not just on cars, on literally everything. So how do we compete? The only way we can compete is by doing better stuff. Is by doing better products. Now, what are we deciding in the Western world, whether in Europe, whether in the United States? Essentially, we're saying, we can't compete with this. Let's put up tariff barriers. Let's in fact just block their products. Let's embrace protectionism. But down this path, this is not a way to get your products better. You go down this path, which is the path that Brazil went down, the path that Argentina went down. The whole thing about protectionism is essentially you're encouraging your domestic producers to remain mediocre. And so we're saying, look, we're going to try to keep what we have here at home, and these guys will continue getting better and better, and we'll just stay mediocre. The only way we can compete is by competing and by getting better. Now, when was the Tesla today is the same Tesla as it was 5 years ago, essentially. The BYD today is so different from a BYD 5 years ago. It's not even funny.
偷偷告诉大家，我最近发现了新法宝 Royal Face 逆时奇迹系列，它有活肤露、全效精华，还有精华霜。尤其我皮肤比较偏干，所以我非常的注重保湿。保湿做得好，肌肤自然烹润。提亮肤色更年轻，抚平皱纹超有感，而且气色变好，用心保养，每天都更美一点。美吧。